Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back, rockers and fellow horse nerds, especially in the therapy world. I've got Sanaa Pharayra here, who runs something rather interesting with minis. It's called the Romeo Roadshow. And she goes around with these minis, not just, I think, but rather interestingly, to memory care facilities, people with Alzheimer's, people with dementia. And with her minis, helps people recover memory. And this is becoming a sort of cutting edge of the equine assisted world. She's beginning to work with the University of Southern California and Cal State in the Channel Islands University to try and get data now. Why does this work? Like, how is it that we're able to reach into a brain really, that is eroded and seeming to contract and die, and yet with the right equine intervention, we can recover all kinds of memory and bring back all sorts of mind and consciousness and so on. You know, what's going on with this? And so many of us who work in the field either are working with kids and young adults, or if people are working in the sort of assisted psychotherapy field, they're perhaps working with adults who are seeking therapy in a sort of top-down kind of a way. But this population with Alzheimer's and dementia really is its own universe and its own world. So I'm fascinated to talk to you, Sanaa. Can you tell us why you do this, how you started doing this, and actually what it is you do?
Well, it was a complete surprise to me that I ended up doing this. And it's an interesting story. Essentially, it started with the rescuing a miniature horse that was in a very sad situation. His owner had passed away, and he had a companion, another miniature horse that he'd lived with his entire life. They lived in a woman's backyard. And the other horse sadly passed away right after they went to a foster situation. And around that time, we happened to be looking to adopt a horse for a companion for another horse. And I had every intention of finding a full-size rescue horse. But this little horse showed up. It was a super sad situation. And we ended up adopting him. And he was an older and like in his teenage approximately miniature horse. And he was kind of a typical, what I would describe as a typical situation where he was a pasture pet. As I'm sure you're aware, a lot of miniature horses, it's sort of like the Easter Bunny effect where people get them because they're cute, but they don't really do a lot with them. So he was a little scared of people. You know, he hadn't really had the right diet. He had Cushing's disease, you know, his feet hadn't been trimmed properly.
You're going to say he had dementia. We went in there and we recovered all his memories. Sorry, don't make that joke.
As far as I know, he didn't have dementia, but I, you know, in my career, like with horses, I've had many times that we've gotten a horse and fixed it up. And so anyway, we started working with him, grooming him, got him on the right feeding program, did all the vet work, did the lab work, got him on Cushing's medication, you know, fixed his feet. And he started coming around like pretty quickly, actually. Like he started getting more comfortable with us and really becoming quite friendly to where he would come up to us. And to give you an idea of how feral he was, the people that had fostered him when his owner passed away were not able to catch him and his friend, and they had to rope them to get a hold of them and basically physically put them into a horse trailer. So I didn't really, you know, have any grand aspirations other than to help this animal. So as he started to become healthier, I was then able to start exercising him and have some training sessions with him. I just kind of put him in the training schedule with the big horses. You know, he had like maybe 4 times a week, and I wouldn't I didn't do a ton. I do like 20-minute sessions with them. I taught him how to lunge, taught him how to, listen to my voice, different, just basic stuff, really. Like more I was trying to get him fit so he'd be healthier. And he just kept getting cuter and cuter and cuter. And he ended up making this metamorphosis into like a unicorn, like pretty much like creature. And when we got him, he had a horrible haircut. Somebody chopped his forelock off. He was fat, he was dirty. And he did have big, beautiful brown eyes and a really cute head. And I knew he would be cute once he had had some good care. So, and then, people would come over to meet him, family and friends, and he was just so great with everybody and everybody loved him so much. And we ended up deciding that, well, we had transported him in a horse trailer to bring him home. And when we brought him home, and obviously he hadn't been hauled around very much at that point because he'd just been in a pastures or in a backyard his whole life. When we put him in the horse trailer, we noticed that he was standing up on his back legs and like putting his hooves on the window to try to see out. And it was just kind of like, oh, wow, like doesn't have a window, it's not the right size for him. And we ended up deciding to build a little miniature sized horse van for him that was size appropriate so that he could travel around and go places. And so we got this little van. We just bought like a little Nissan van. And I hired a guy that does horse trailer repair and welding. And we basically built a prototype miniature horse van, and we built a horse box that inserted into the back of the van and bolted to the frame that looks a lot like the inside of a horse trailer. It has the pads, like a horse trailer has. And the hardest part of the project was figuring out how to make the ramp system work. So we had to rebuild the ramp several times, but we finally got it to where it worked pretty well. And once around the time that the van got finished, we decided that, and this was just really a fun project we were doing. Like, oh, Romeo's, and his name was Romeo. Romeo's coming around. We want to take him places. We want to be able to share him with people because he's just so great. So
that
amazing.
was going to be my question: is how did he go from your head to a companion horse? To a horse that you want to drive around? You want to randomly drive him around? You want to take him
I think
to Walmart? What is it that you want to do with this horse? Why do you want to drive him around?
Well, I ventured into this whole project with Daryl Hannah, and I think she was really inspired by how much he turned around through the rehabilitation process.
Okay.
And how friendly he became. And people that were invited to come over to meet him were visibly like excited, and happy to meet him and couldn't stop talking about him and would say like, he's magical. Like this was like something that kept coming up is people would say he's magical. And so I think just seeing that, it really brightened people's day. Everyone really loved him. He was not intimidating because he was little, and he was so friendly too. The more we worked with him, he became extremely like outgoing and demonstrative, like where he gives you little kisses, he'll put his nose up to your cheek, and he's so sweet. And so I think the idea was at first was like, let's be able to take him places. One, so it's a new thing for his training that he can get used to traveling. And two, to show him to people that wouldn't be able to come to where he lives. So that's how the
but you must have had in your mind a sort of, because you told me just before we hit record that you came up, you were a professional horsewoman, in the hunter jumper thing, then you start running your own barn and blah, 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 blah. And you become a horse trainer for some well-known people. You mentioned Daryl Hannah, and this is not necessarily a logical thing to then say, look, this mini who's shown up that is really cute. Let's drive him around. There must have been some kind of thing in your mind saying, there's a particular type of person that might benefit from meeting this pony. Where were you thinking to drive him to build a whole thing for him?
Okay.
It's not something you do randomly, right? Yeah.
I would really say it was Daryl that was the one that had the heart to do it because she said, I want to share them with people.
Okay, so
And
this being
I
Daryl
didn't,
Hannah, who we all know from the movies,
yeah,
Horse Lady. So
yeah.
she said, okay, maybe
She
it would
said,
be
I want to share them with
for
people.
people
I
to
think
meet
he's
this horse. Okay,
magical. I want to share them with people.
got
And
it.
and she said, I want to build a van so we can take him anywhere because, as you know, a truck and trailer you can't take anywhere, right?
Absolutely.
And she was just, I think, inspired and wanted to share, which was incredibly amazing of her. What I did know, I knew that wherever we took him, it would be well received, and I knew that by that point he'd had enough training that it was safe, to take him out in
Right. And
public.
at first was your idea, oh, we're already going to horse shows, so why don't we take him along and it'll be cute? Or was it from the get-go, you know what, maybe we should reach out to schools or something like that? Like normally
No,
there's some sort of imaginary plan that comes in this phenomenon.
by that point in my career, I had phased out of doing a lot of horse shows, so I
Yeah.
wasn't doing that as much, but I have also in my background run some large programs with horses interacting with the public, like trail riding businesses, riding school businesses. I've worked with like
Okay.
Girl Scout groups, like all that kind of outreach, to the public.
Okay.
So I mean, I know I'm very well aware of how much people love horses, particularly in an urban environment where they don't get to
Mm,
see them very often.
mm.
So I was rolling with it, knowing that I knew it would be well received by people, but I'm telling you, I had no thought in my head about it being a therapy situation like that. I thought it was just kind of a cute, fun project we were working on, like something just to put on my resume that I helped design a miniature
Okay.
horse van,
Okay.
like honestly, at that point, that's what I thought. But when the van when the van was completed and ready to hit the road, Daryl came up with the idea of calling it Romeo Roadshow, which was really cute and funny. And so we're like, okay, and she actually had a little logo that she drew based on a picture of Romeo. When one of the things I would do from time to time is free jump him in our round pen just for fun. So it was like a little picture of him jumping. And so we started taking him out and about, like all over the place, public places. We took him to the beach, we took him to parks, and get him used to going in the van, going up and down the ramp, being in busy areas. And he was great. And people flocked to us wherever we went. And what was really interesting is this word magic keeps coming up, but random people that we didn't know that we met like literally on the street would come up to meet the horses and they would say like they're magical. So
Yeah.
it was like constantly being reinforced, this idea that Romeo was magical. And people would say, you just made my day, like you just made me so happy, I can't stop smiling. And so at first that was kind of what was happening, and he was getting used to traveling. And then the next thing that happened that I think was really pivotal and kind of really changed the direction of everything was Daryl's sister has a charity called the Painted Turtle, and it's a camp for critically ill children to basically get to have a summer camp experience. It's the sister camp to Paul Newman's camp on the East Coast called the Hole in the Wall Game Camp. And they were having a holiday party in December of that year. And they asked if we would come and bring Romeo. So we thought, oh yeah, this will just be another outreach thing that we do, or just another fun thing to do with Romeo. So we take Romeo to the camp, and there's kids like in wheelchairs with leg braces, walkers, all kinds of different, special needs and health situations. And Romeo was so good. And he was literally mobbed by a group of these children. And at one point, and he was so perfect. I mean, I can't even tell you how well he behaved. It was like as if he completely understood what was going on. At one point, I looked at him and he had his head in the lap of a child in a small wheelchair. And there's so many kids surrounding his entire body, both sides of him, and their little hands were all over him. You almost couldn't even see him anymore. Like you couldn't see any of the little white hair of his body because their hands were all over him. And he just was standing there perfectly still, just letting them love on him. And it literally was like this moment. I think both Daryl and I at the same time realized, seeing that he was a therapy animal. It was just sort of like this moment of like, oh my God, he's a therapy animal. Like it's weird now looking back on it that I didn't see it coming, but that I think is what really started off the direction to go in that path. And then also, so then we did a couple other events with the Painted Turtle, and there was another children's charity that I had gotten connected with that also worked with critically ill children, and we did some stuff with them. And all of the things we did were extremely popular. Same thing happened everywhere we went. Romeo would be mobbed, and it was like there wasn't really enough Romeo to go around. And we figured out pretty early on.
That's what she said, sir.
It's true. Pretty early on, we were like, we should get to another horse because if we're going to be doing this, there's room in the van. We were usually the two of us would go together. So we should have two horses. That way, there's more petting options and all this stuff. So I basically put an ad out in my horse network looking to adopt a miniature horse that had a temperament to do therapy work. And I found Ziggy. And Ziggy was a teenage miniature horse as well. And his owner had done a little bit of stuff with him to where we kind of knew right away that he would work in our program. And we got Ziggy, and first we had a little play date to make sure they liked each other. And we introduced the horses. It went really well because our idea was that they would live together in the same stall and share the same paddock and stuff. So we wanted to make sure that Romeo approved. So that went really well, thankfully. So we got Ziggy, and right around that time point, Daryl had said to me, I really think we should do some work with seniors also. So I had been looking for some places.
Why did she say that?
I think honestly, just from her heart, she's like, we need to share them with everybody. And like seniors were people we hadn't shared them with yet.
Okay. So it wasn't simple. That she had a particular thing with seniors. It was more kids have been seeing him. What about old people?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think, and I really just think it came from a desire to share it, because it was so positive. And so I had found an organization in our area that has an adult daycare program where basically a lot of the participants have memory care issues, and they basically just go for the day. And it's a way for their caretakers or their family that cares for them to still be able to go to work or get other things done during the day. And then they do different activities with the people, and they, feed them lunch and stuff like that. So we started with this organization called Senior Concerns, and they have a courtyard area in the middle of their building. So it's like an outdoor area, and they arranged chairs kind of in a circular seating arrangement. And we brought Romeo and Ziggy in, and we would just kind of spread out, and we'd visit each person sitting, and they would be seated. Some people were in wheelchairs, other people sat in chairs, and we would visit each person for a couple of minutes, and we kind of go around in a circle a few times, and we visited for like about 45 minutes. And it was great. Everybody loved it. It was interesting because most of the people were very comfortable with the horses. And then there were a few people that had grown up with horses that were super comfortable with the horses right away. And then there were a few people that were scared of the horses. So I just kind of intuitively, obviously I'm not going to force anyone to pet them that's scared, but I would still go like I'd still bring the horses near the person, not maybe quite as close. And we just kind of hang out in their presence for a couple of minutes. So I'd still spend some time in their presence, but just allow them to sit there if they didn't want to engage. They didn't have to pet the horse, and I'd move on. So anyway, the first visit went really well, and they really wanted us to come once a month. So I go back the next time, and I noticed that the people that had been scared were better than the first time I'd been there. Still not completely comfortable, but noticeably better. And so But again, at that point, I didn't really think much of it. And then the third time I went, so 3 months into this, every one of the people that had been scared was no longer scared anymore. And they were all petting the horses, smiling, like obviously enjoying the experience. But what was very interesting is they didn't seem to remember that I'd been there before, because they ask me like the same questions every time, because I'll go around like 2 to 3 laps usually per visit. They'll ask me the same questions. Some of the people will, not everybody has the same amount of cognitive decline, but what are their names? Are they boys or girls? How old are, the same questions over and over and over. And I just keep answering them, when I get asked the same thing. But I thought to myself, I'm like, this is pretty remarkable, because I know as a riding instructor that teaching people who have fear issues, it takes a long time to overcome fear. Like, yeah, and the only way you can overcome fear, in my opinion, is to have repeated positive experiences, that basically take the place of whatever, the fear issue came from. And so the fact that they became so much more confident in only 3 visits, when I wasn't able to also use language to explain anything to them, it was just the experience of the horse being there. Even though they didn't remember that I'd been there, that to me was like kind of blew my mind. And I have been around therapeutic riding programs multiple times in my life. I was on the board of directors of one, and I've supplied horses for some therapeutic riding programs. So I've been kind of like a little bit in that world. I wouldn't say fully immersed, but I never I've never worked with seniors, or people with cognitive decline, but I was really fascinated by that. The program just kept growing. We got more facilities that had day programs that wanted us to come. So we started expanding our schedule and basically trying to go once a month. So it kind of got to where we knew a lot of the people that we were visiting, and we were observing changes in them and seeing like people that were very disengaged, they even kind of staring off into space, not looking at you. And then you bring the horse up to them, and all of a sudden they'd wake up and become alert and like go to the horse, pet the horse, even smile. People that, as far as I know, didn't talk much, like at all or much. I've heard them say words or talk to the horses. The care staff has told us multiple times that's turned people's days around. Someone was having a hard day after the visit with the horses, they were noticeably better.
Mm.
I've seen people that appeared to be agitated or ruminating on something kind of snap out of it when the horses were there and they were visiting with the horses. And so I was just really like a lot of interesting observations. And then I just started asking questions, because I was also getting to know the people that work at the facilities, the care staff, and the people that run the programs. I was also getting to know them. And this is something else that was very interesting to me, is that every one of the places that we visit also has dog therapy programs that come regularly, not at the same time as us, but on the schedule, they come regularly. And so I would ask the staff, how does this compare to the dog therapy visits? Like, are you seeing the same thing when the dogs visit? Is it different? And every one of them has told me that they see much greater engagement when the horses are there.
Mm.
So I thought that was fascinating too. And then that really, like all of these things that I was seeing, just, it kind of inspired me to go down a rabbit hole of finding out, has anyone done research on this? Because I know that there's been some research on autism and equine therapy and PTSD and equine therapy, but I hadn't heard of anything that had been done with older adults with cognitive decline. So I started looking to see if anything had been done before. And it's very, very minimal what's been done previously. And I think you may have spoken to Nancy and Paula, who have the
Yes, I
Connected
have.
Horse program. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's we actually just published that podcast with them. So just listeners and people watching on YouTube go back and find. We'll give you their name again in a moment because they're the ones who are doing. Just go find that episode because they're the ones who are doing the research on cognition, dementia, and so on with horses. Just give us their names again, Sanaa.
It's Nancy and Paula, and it's The Connected Horse.
The Connected Horse. That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
And so that is how I met them. I was just trying to find out, who's done research, who knows anything about this that I can collaborate with or learn
yeah.
something from. And that's how I found them basically. And I reached out to them and they were very gracious they've met with me a bunch of times via Zoom and we've talked about stuff. And their program's different because it's focused more on individuals with mild cognitive decline and their caregivers, and they go to a facility that has mostly, I think, large horses, and they do a program at a facility. But the two of them are, lifelong horse people, but they're also work in the gerontology field, so they have a lot of expertise in that field. So they've been very helpful, and so
Nancy Shear and Paula Hertel. That's
yes,
just, yeah.
yes,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah. Okay, please
Yes.
go on.
I
Yeah.
didn't want to butcher their last names. So anyway, I've been talking to them, and they also have a very brilliant veterinarian named Dr. Claudia Sonder, who's on their board, who
Yeah.
helped with their study that they did. And she was formerly the head of research at the UC Davis Vet School. And she's really incredible and has a lot of experience doing research with horse stuff. So she helped them with their study. And they've been really helpful. But long story short, I think both Daryl and I kind of realized the more we did this work, first of all, there was a massive amount of need for it that we had no idea about.
And
And
this
we
is
were,
all happening in the LA area, right? All in Southern
yeah,
California.
well, Southern California, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that also what we saw how much it was helping people and how great it was. And we wanted to do as much as we could to advance the field and help it, and kind of were surprised no one's done this before. Like it's kind of incredible to think of it like that. And so we kind of came to the conclusion that we need to somehow be, involved in some research to look at this because I mean, I'm blown away. I've been blown away by some of the things I've seen, but it's not my specialty, to do research on this population. So I started working on reaching out through, just whatever connections we had. I started networking to see if we could find some partners that would help us with a study. And that's how we got connected with Cal State Channel Islands. And we have a professor named Ronald Burkowski, he specializes in gerontology research. And he's been working with us over the summer to kind of help figure out how we're going to do a study. And the idea is we'll probably start with a small study, hopefully in the fall or in this next school year.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're working out the details of that now, but that's kind of been sort of like where the next chapter is going, is to, get some greater understanding from the academic and science community, I would say.
I'm on your website right now. That's why I got
Okay.
distracted. And I'm looking at all these pictures of Romeo and Ziggy with old people. And it's remarkable because I'm not just looking at the pictures of them, I'm looking at the pictures of him. And there's a particular picture I'm looking at where he is receiving a kiss and sort of giving a kiss to a
Yeah.
lady in a straw hat. And I can see just in his eye the depth of sort of understanding that he's got going on. And of course, I have a bit of a background with this myself. And my son, who was diagnosed with very severe autism when he was
Right.
3, nonverbal, pooing his pants, self-harming tantrums, the whole 9 yards. When he met my neighbor's quarter horse mare, Betsy, there was a moment like that with that exact expression that I'm just seeing in that picture there with Romeo, where she saw something in him and seemed to accept a kind of responsibility where she would then modify her behavior in ways that were so remarkable. He
Right.
pulled under her hooves that first day without knowing her in the pasture with the other horses around her before I could get to him. And
Right.
I knew the mare a little bit, and I knew she was a bit of a boss bitch. And if she was going to move the other horses off, she might do it with her ears back and you know, a little bit of a rush.
Right.
And she moved them off with this really gentle, like movement of the nose and bent her head to Rowan and licked and
Yes.
chewed. And I could see past, I'm sure you had this moment too, and I'm sure a lot of listeners have had this moment where you think you know about horses. You've been around horses all your life,
Yeah.
and you do. There's a lot you know. There's a lot you don't know. And when you see a moment like that, you realize, oh my God, there is this entire universe in there that I only know the very, very outer periphery of.
Totally. We don't know anything really, you know. They
No.
have so much to teach us.
And it's interesting to me that, when I was a kid or a teenager, we were aware growing up in England of riding for the disabled, RDA.
Uh-huh.
But it wasn't something I ever got involved in because I wasn't interested, and I
Uh-huh.
wasn't interested at all until my son became as
Right.
he was. And then suddenly he forges a relationship with my neighbor's mare and he begins to speak when I start to ride with him. And oh
Mhm.
my gosh, now I'm suddenly in that world. But I'm always rather impressed by people that want to get into that world
Mhm.
anyway,
Right.
not just for selfish reasons like me. But what I find fascinating about the whole thing is it used to be that the therapy world was really something very apart from the regular riding world or the regular
Mhm.
horse world or the showing world or whatever. And now I think that is really changing. I think
Right.
the therapy world is now bleeding over into the mainstream and
Right.
causing a lot of people in the mainstream to recalibrate and rethink, like, why am I doing this at all? I guess I'm involved with horses because it kind of makes me feel better,
Right.
because I'm not using them to go to the supermarket.
Right.
And when I go to the doctor, I drive my car. And so the only reason I'm involved with this animal at all is really for my mental well-being. And then, oh, what about the animal's well-being? And I love that your story started with this horse being somewhat of a rescue horse
Mhm.
and you restoring him to well-being and
Right.
then him taking that well-being and transmitting that to others. And weirdly, I,
Yes.
I feel that the therapy world has some catching up to do in this regard, that up until relatively recently, the attitude has been the horse must be quiet to do therapy, but
Right.
that's it, right? So it doesn't
Right.
matter if he's stiff or arthritic or not feeling good, and we'll stable him 24 hours a day because we just want him conveniently there. And he'll
Yes.
just do like a bunch of sessions a day. And all we require of this horse is to be quiet while we lead him around. And of course, the
Right.
horses hate it and go sour and start to, bite the handlers and gradually get stiffer and sicker.
Right.
Um, and now people in the therapeutic world are realizing, yeah, no, we have to give these horses well-being, or they will have no well-being to give. But it's interesting how that's a bit of a late conclusion that,
Well,
yeah.
that's I think that from my perspective, and I really think it's great that so many people want to be involved in all of this, but there is this massive wave of interest in animal therapy that's
Mm,
happening right now, not just with horses, but even with dogs and
mm,
other animals.
sure.
My concern is that it's not well regulated, and that I my previous experiences with it, I felt like the horsemanship aspect wasn't as
Yeah,
prominent as it should have been. And to your point, and I experienced the exact same things in the riding schools, that I think that there's
yeah,
this idea that these sort of dull, lazy, burnout horses are quote unquote safe. And that this is, and to have a therapy program, you just go get a suitable horse. And then a lot of the protocols are just based on assuming you have a suitable horse, but not going into the depths of How do you determine the horse is suitable? How do you maintain the horse? How do you take a horse and make them suitable? Like all
Yeah.
of that requires a great deal of horsemanship that cannot be acquired in a short period of time.
I
And
wholeheartedly agree.
I've been one of the things I've been really, really dying to talk to you about, because I was I was blown away when I found out you were doing therapy work on upper level dressage horses.
Yeah.
And I thought that's super interesting because there is this, like, because we focus on in our work with the miniature horses, we're focusing on emotional engagement.
Hmm.
So to have emotional engagement with the horses can't be exhausted, tired, or burnout or dull. They have to be alert and bright
Happy.
and
Yeah.
happy, yes, but also they also have to be trained so that they're safe too. So
Hmm.
they're and that's the hallmark of a well-trained horse, is that they can be both responsive and relaxed at the same time.
Exactly.
But that takes
Exactly.
a higher level of skill to produce that over and over and over again.
It does, and one has to be curious enough to want to acquire that skill.
Right.
As you know, horse people are notoriously defensive about, and in
Right.
fact, I go further and say toxic about dying on the hill of their particular discipline or
Yes.
enthusiasm or whatever,
Yeah.
hating ever going back to being a beginner again,
Right.
defending like to the death their own position rather than doing what any other professional would do in any other field and saying, well, look, in order to get professional development, maybe I need to go outside my discipline a bit and, you
Oh,
know,
definitely.
learn from other people. And
Yeah.
so, but I am, of course, naturally curious, and I'm also a journalist, and I had, a background working in human rights in Africa long before
It's
I
cool.
got my life taken sideways by autism.
Uh-huh.
But I was always a horse person and I was always curious. So I grew up very much in the sort of fox hunting heartland of what they call the Shires of England, which is,
Okay.
you guys will be like your Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And that's the areas of land in the Midlands of England where fox hunting and cross country riding was born. And you get those huge big hedges and, we all grew up jumping them. And
Right.
then, eventing comes out of that and show jumping comes out of that and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it all very quickly got exported to the Americas through the colonials, people like Lord Fairfax. And so George Washington was a fox hunter and blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up in the sort of belly of that tradition. And I remember there was a traveling horse show going around in the 80s, the early 80s. I'm a teenager and people had gone to see it and it was really good. There were people doing really interesting things with horses that we didn't normally get to see. And I remember hearing it discussed by a couple of the people out hunting, going, well, I don't train my horse to do circus tricks. And I remember thinking, well, but why not? Like, why would that in any way detract from them being able to take you over a hedge? And maybe it would sort of deepen your horsemanship. And anyway, a lot of horses ride and drive and ride and plow because even when
Right.
I was growing up, there was still a lot of horses being trained to harness who also were riding horses. So, what's the problem with cross fertilization? I know what it is. You're afraid of what you don't know. Okay, fine, I understand that. But when it got to with me, I noticed, you see, from day one that my son was up on the horse, that the rhythm that the horse was in made a difference to whether or not he spoke. It was that simple that if the horse was in some sort of soft collection, and I wasn't in any way a dressage person at that time, this is like 2004, so I knew enough about the bare minimum jumping collection that I could
Uh-huh.
and I had lots of hours up on this horse with Rowan, so I could
Uh-huh.
kind of work out a bit of a private language with her and
Right.
with using my weight and so on. And eventually I could train her to what they call the terre à terre, the ground to ground in classical dressage, which is like a piaffe and canter. And when I did that, my God, I mean, he just so then of course
Yeah.
I started wondering, well, would that be other kids as well? Is that just him? And I noticed, yeah, immediately, any kid I did that with, just communication,
Yeah.
communication, communication. So then, of course, I had to get curious. Well, why? Why is that working? So something's happening in the brain, something's happening in the nervous system. Very like you reaching out to the universities. I said, well, who knows? Who knows about brains and nervous systems. That's neuroscientists. All right. So I ring up some neuroscientists and say, look, we're doing this thing and this is what's happening. And I send them
Right.
a video and some of them come and look and they explain it to me. They say, oh, right, Rupert, what's going on when the horse is in this kind of soft collection is that it's rocking your guys' hips in rhythm. And when that happens, it makes your body produce this hormone called oxytocin, which not only feels really good, because it does feel really good to do it, but it calms an over-agitated nervous system so that it calms down the amygdala, which
Mhm.
is being triggered all the time by thinking there's a threat, therefore telling the body to produce the stress hormone, cortisol, which blocks learning,
Right.
and you're giving them the antidote. And more than that, because the vestibular system's being so activated, because you're up there for quite a while and you're playing games up there and things, it's causing the brain to produce this amino acid, this protein. And that protein has a name. It's got a
Mhm.
four-letter acronym, BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, which means getting more brain cells, basically. That
Yes.
the amino acid, the protein becomes a stem cell that becomes a neuron,
Right.
billions of them. And then among these
Yes.
neurons are some of particular interest to people like you, Rupert, because there's some particular neurons called Purkinje cells. We should call them
Mhm.
Purkinje cells because they were discovered by a Czech dude in the 19th
Uh-huh.
century with a very big microscope. And these things govern motor skills, doing stuff, and social skills. So you are taking someone with an overactive nervous system, oversensitive nervous system, overactive amygdala, who's basically poisoned by too much cortisol, therefore can't learn, and is, in a state of distress, and you're filling them with the antidote hormone, which happens to also be a hormone of communication, which is useful when you're
Right.
dealing with autoism, auto being the
Yeah.
Greek word for the self, locked within the self, difficulties,
Right.
the relationship with the exterior world. You're filling them with a communication hormone that makes them feel good and social skill cells. So guess what? You see change. And when we understood that, we were like, okay, so we can replicate this. So we came up with a way of replicating it with a horse boy
Uh-huh.
method with a kid in front of you, and a way of replicating it without a horse, because we also thought, well, what are you giving to the families when they go home? They haven't got a
Right.
horse, right? So they need some way to keep this type of movement going. So we would show them that, and that's called movement method. All right, fine. But then we realized, yeah, but how do you train the horses to be able to deliver this without like having 1,000 hours up there to work out a private language? So then I was like, okay, fine. I need to talk to people who really know how to train this kind of thing. And that
Right.
eventually led down a rabbit hole of discovering that it's all about in-hand work and it's all about teaching the dressage, the classical dressage on the ground. And if you can do that, then you have horses that can collect in this soft way, which is joyful for the horse, because when horses are in a state of joy, they move like that. And when they're in
It's
their
also
quiet time,
it's a very focused state for a horse.
it is. And but there's that, but it's tied into their passionate behaviors. It's tied into their play and mating, and it's to some degree fighting behaviors, just like it is in humans. So you go to the non-explosive end of it. You go towards the sort of quiet joy end of it. And luckily, there's a classical system for this. So I, went and learned from people in Portugal and learned sort of quite obsessively, and then
Yeah.
found that we could replicate how to create a therapy horse that had the ability to do this. And of course, the ability
Yeah.
to do this isn't just understanding some movements. They need exceptional amounts of muscle. They need,
Right.
and then we also realized, back to that BDNF thing that we were talking about, that the horses get it too, because when you work with them in hand in that way, they're constantly crossing the midline of their body. And when
Right.
any mammal does that, whether you're a monkey like us or whether you're a horse or a dog, your brain produces that BDNF thing. So you effectively grow a new brain. We were getting all these therapy horses in who were messed up in various ways.
Kind of
And
like yoga.
very likely, but to think of it as a mix between yoga, martial arts, and dance. And
Yeah.
all of
No,
those sort of serve
definitely.
the same functions to some degree, but in slightly different ways. But they all have this effect on the brain and the body. And so what happened was we were getting these donation horses, which were coming without well-being and
Right.
often feeling bad and often feeling kind of grumpy,
Right.
with a sort of default no in them, but who are quiet.
Yeah.
And after we had done this with them for, oh, not long, they would go from no to maybe to okay to all right
Yeah.
to yes to at your service, madam. Like we
Yes.
we would watch them transform, very similar to what you talked about with Romeo. As you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, BDNF.
Well, as they become more physically capable, and it's easier for them too, probably for the collected movements, because as you said, it does take time to develop their bodies to be able to
Mm.
do that.
But not a crazy amount of time. That's the thing. So there is this really efficient old masters system. You can do it in
If you
about
know
three
what you're
months.
doing, if you know what you're doing,
Well, the
it
only
doesn't
way you
take a
can know
while.
what you're doing is if you go and get mentorship. The only way you can know
Right.
what you're doing is if you let somebody else teach you, right?
Right.
And of course, I had a really good motivation for that because of my son and
Right.
wanting to help other people like my son. So I wasn't interested in maintaining a status quo of my
Right.
horsemanship. I was very motivated to learn new things. But
Yeah.
what I have seen frequently in the therapy world is that people are not curious and people are not wanting to learn new things. And
Right.
this saddens me because as an autism dad, I'm like, well, that means you're prioritizing your desire for a status quo over helping people like my son. And frankly, that saddens me. So it's really interesting for me to hear your story because there's so many parallels where, but what stands out for me, particularly with you there, is curiosity. You seem to be
Mhm.
an unusually curious horse person, that you've made
Yes.
that journey from the hunter jumper thing, which is great because it gives you lots of expertise, and then
Mhm.
into the sort of public outreach end. But you begin to
Right.
notice, yeah, but some of these horses, they're not feeling so good. But
Right.
you put that in the back of your mind. What can I do about that? And then you fall into running this stable for Daryl, and you're doing now exploring all kinds of other things. You were telling me you started exploring liberty. You started exploring all these other aspects of horsemanship without ditching
Right.
any of the other things that you'd learned.
Right.
And then you arrive at a point where you can produce a horse like Romeo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things, there's so many different offshoots of this, but before I did, as we talked, our mutual friend Kansas set
Kansas
this up.
Paradine, one of the best
Yeah.
humans on this planet. Yeah.
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
She's great. And Kansas had been telling me I needed, to talk to you. And so I went and I watched your documentary and I watched several presentations that you had on YouTube and I watched a bunch of your podcasts. And So I heard the story about you discovering that some of those upper level movements were more effective. And I heard you talking about in one of your presentations, your observed responses, in your son and the other individuals with autism that you were working with. And one of the things I wanted to discuss with you, because it kind of blew my mind, is a lot of the things that you were telling me that you noticed the positive benefits are parallel almost exactly what I'm seeing in my work. But with what I'm doing, nobody's riding a horse. So that kind of blew my mind. I wanted to talk to you about that because I did see that you'd consulted with Temple Grandin, and I did hear about the movement method and the theory about the movement. And I myself know from getting to ride horses that are trained at a high level, I know the feeling of those collective gaits, the piaffe, passage, like, you know, it from myself experiencing it, it is a thrilling,
Yeah, we call it
like,
the horsegasm, having the horsegasm.
yeah,
Like
I mean, there's
you
so
don't
much like,
experience that movement and get off the horse and go, oh, that was all right.
yeah.
You're like, oh, I want to do that again, right? Yeah,
Yeah. And
it's
so
addictive.
but I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to talk to Rupert about this, because I wanted to tell you, I'm seeing
This without
similarities
without sys-
without writing. And that's another reason why it's been blowing my mind, because there's
so
no writing involved.
I can speculate as to why that is. So we have a third program
Mhm.
called Takin. It's a weird word. It's a Mongolian
No.
word, Takhin, Takin Equine Integration. And this arose, like everything that we do, somewhat organically, because once we were down that road of training the horses to these high levels, we were beginning to attract a lot of dressage clients as well as the therapy work. And we got very quickly overwhelmed with the number of people that, wanted to sign up. And we kind of needed to, because, the dressage people would subsidize the therapy work we were doing.
Right.
But we ran out of time to train and condition our horses. And we
Mhm.
sort of panicked a bit. And then I came out of the funk and went, oh, I'm an idiot. The clients should be the horse trainers. That's just a no-brainer. They can totally do this, particularly the horses that already know how to do it, but just need maintenance. They need to be lunged. They need long reining. They need to be worked
Right.
in hand. There's no reason why an adult autist could not do this. There's no reason why the foster kids that we are dealing with, the teenagers, there's no reason why they can't do this. There's no reason why these PTSD first responders and soldiers that we deal with they can, of course they can do this, And so we train them to do it, and absolutely they could do it, because also these horses could sort of show them how to do it. And then some of them got
Right.
quite good at it. So then we could say, oh, well, why don't you help us, take some of this new intake of horses? Some people were just quite natural horse people. And because they weren't riding, it was an easier transmission of skills. But then we, it's very funny actually. I was giving a talk at Denver University, and was talking and being quite frank about how sad I had been about some of the not so great things I'd seen in therapy, and more than that, how
Right.
one particular big organization had really gone after us and kind of attacked us when we appeared on the scene. It was the biggest organization. And I thought,
Mhm.
why? Like, surely we're all here for the same thing. What I didn't know was that the board of that organization was sitting in the audience. So I got an email.
Oops.
The email said, should we talk? And I said, yeah, of course, absolutely.
Mhm.
So we have this meeting, and luckily I had Betsy Carl, who I'd also done a recent podcast with, who was one of their senior instructors, but also worked for me
Okay.
on the course. I said, look, you should be on this call because, you're one of them.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we got no beef. We never said anything bad about you, Rupert. I'm like, come on, why are we even having this conversation? What
Right.
I want to know is why? What's your problem? And
Right.
after a while, they would go, and all right, fine, we think you're dangerous. And I said, well, I'm knocking on wood here. In 15, now 20 years of doing this, we've never had an accident, and we work in 40 countries. So what danger specifically are you referring
Right.
to? Right. And they said, well, it's the back riding. It's the riding with the kid. And I said, well, right, but we have no accidents doing that. And
Right.
then it came and said, well, we in our organization, when we did it, we had accidents. So that's why we stopped doing it. And that's why we don't think anyone else should do it. And then the penny dropped. I was like, oh, Of course you did, because
Right.
you don't know how to prepare a horse and you don't know how to prepare a rider. So if you take some donation horse,
And not everybody can do that
right,
too.
right,
That's
no,
like a
and exactly,
different,
it's
you
not your
know,
shtick, right?
yeah,
To say that it's unsafe and crap means that it's also quite racist, because you're denying the entire culture of Northern Asia. You're denying the entire culture of America west of the Mississippi, where most kids grew up in front of mum and dad in West and South,
yeah,
and the entire culture of, Central and South America. That's a bit
yeah,
racist, isn't it? And like you saying that these are like shit horse cultures when they're clearly
yeah,
not, right? So, but I said, I do get it. And so for you and your organization, you probably shouldn't do it. Right. Absolutely. But we are different. And that's when luckily Betsy chimed in and said, look, the way these guys prepare their horses and their riders, it's, I haven't seen anything better, frankly, in terms of well-being. But so basically we started training our clients to be the in-hand classical dressage trainers. And we could say to someone, look, this horse was broken in service. Please, would you help me put him back together so that he can
uh-huh,
serve that autistic kid over there? And we
right.
realized that was its own therapy, because
Mhm.
what really gets you through therapy is a sense of purpose. And that's what builds resilience. And also the BDNF, the growing of a new brain, builds
Yeah,
resilience. And you don't, if you say you're traumatized, you don't want to stay traumatized forever. Like a hunted deer doesn't need therapy after it gets away from the wolves. It will shake off the cortisol and go back to its normal behavior. We are very resilient humans. If we weren't, the entire population of the Western world would have collapsed after World War II, but it didn't. People went on
right.
and thrived. So clearly we can do this. And so we thought like you did, but if they're not riding the horses, will they get the same thing? But they're touching the horses all the time. And
Mhm.
when you're touching the horses and when you are transmitting well-being, mammal to
Mhm.
mammal, it's called the mammalian caregiving system. So also
Mhm.
when Romeo is putting his head in their laps and they are reaching out to him and they are stroking him,
Yeah,
that's like when you get a massage or you pet your dog or you rock your baby, guess what? Oxytocin again,
right.
large amounts of it. Perhaps not the same industrial size shot to the gut and up the spinal column and vagal nerve that you get with being on the horse, but still a lot. And you can sustain this over time. So if you do repeated visits, so what a lot of people have found with these animal assisted therapies is that the other things, people want to complete the therapy. People want to show
Mhm.
up again and again because they build a relationship with the animal.
Mm.
Whereas with a human thing, they might abandon it. They might stop at a certain point. And also humans talk to you and make you feel guilty and make you feel bad. Horses and dogs don't. So they just take you as you are. There was a really good study done at the University of Bournemouth which showed that in domestic violence, I think both perpetrators and victims, a 5-day intervention with horses over 5 weeks, like once a week for 5 weeks, I think, there was a 51% reduction in domestic violence 1 year later. And that was like a
Mhm.
really minimal thing. So I can totally see how with what you're doing, you're basically going around purveying oxytocin. And as you know, a lot of people with dementia often are in a state of high anxiety.
Right.
It's often not a nice place to be.
Right.
So you can come in and assuage and ameliorate and unblock the cortisol. And so therefore cognition kind of improves, boom, like in what seems to be a really sudden way, because there's nothing blocking it anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there does seem to be with the individuals that I would say have more advanced cognitive decline that let's say are nonverbal.
Mm.
I feel like I'm also seeing more pronounced interactions coming from the horse with those individuals. So that's been kind of interesting as well. And like I said, I want some help digging into this more and researching it, but it's something that has kind of curiosity that I have about it is when you take a language off the table and you no longer have the ability to use language to communicate, does that maybe free them up to communicate with the horse and unimpeded in a certain way. It's just something that I've been noticing, and I keep wondering about, because it's almost like the words are getting in the way sometimes, and then when they can't talk, then you just see communication with pure emotion, really. And
I
it's almost
guess
like
you put your finger on something there. Go on. Yeah.
and that's the kind of the wavelength the horses are on anyways. And it's and I also kind of feel like the people that can't use language anymore maybe almost emote more strongly, because that's what they can do, because that's coming from a different place. It's very interesting.
What stands out from what you said is that you see the horses making a greater effort
Hmm.
to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
I observed this with Betsy in those sessions, and I've observed it time and again with other horses. We once had this little boy who had drowned, and he was supposed to be in a state of vegetable, they should have switched off the life support. This is no life, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And they brought him out to us, and I'm like, God, I don't know if we can do anything here,
Right.
and they push him in a wheelchair, and the dude just doesn't seem to be there. And my horse Clue, who was in some ways, a real bastard of a horse. Like he was
Uh-huh.
he was the horse that absolutely proved to me that I do not know how to train a horse, right? But if he felt like doing it, he was like rock solid golden. And he came over, he spotted this kid
Hmm.
as we were just kind of around the front of the house, just kind of scratching our heads a bit, really, and shooting the shit with his parents and caregivers. He spotted it and he came over and he sniffed this boy all over his body. And then he began to lick him.
Hmm.
And he licked him from head to toe. And I've
Yeah.
seen this happen a few times now. And all I could do is like not be in the way.
Right.
But it's natural to think then, oh, is anything actually happening? But yeah, by the end of that session, the boy indicated a couple of things. And for his caregivers, this was like a huge deal.
Hmm.
So what is going on? And I'd invite, if you're watching this on YouTube and you've had similar things, this to people watching, if you had similar things, put it in the comments below. I'd like to know your speculations of what you think is going on when this happens, when you see, because if those of us horse people who've been brought up telling horses what to do, and horses are usually honestly pretty happy to do it, particularly if it's kind of fun, but it's a bit of a one-way communication. And then we see them do what you describe. Why? Why are they doing that? Why are they trying to bridge a gap? So what do you think, Sanaa?
I don't know that I have it all figured out, but I like to try to, I like to try to figure it out. And one thought I have had is, does language make our minds really busy in a way that maybe makes us a little less present? If we could imagine going back to a time before humans had language, and how we still would have had communication before we had language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we would have been able to communicate with each other. But how different would that have been cognitively, because we think in language? And it makes me wonder with the because from what I've been learning, there's a certain part of the brain that governs language, that is affected kind of early on with Alzheimer's and other dementias, depending on which kind you have. So if you lose that, you don't necessarily lose everything, though. You could still have this. Is another thing I didn't know very much about Alzheimer's or dementia when I started doing this. And I kind of thought that when people got those conditions, that they just slowly drifted away until they weren't there anymore and it was just their body. But that's not what I have seen as I've done this work. They are still there. They just don't necessarily have access to the same thing that they had access to before. So it just makes me wonder a lot about language, and if there's like a primal level of communication that maybe we revert back to once we lose language, or never had language in the case of your son early on, before he started talking.
Go ahead. I'm just doing a little bit of brain research on Google here, and then
Yeah.
just keep talking.
And that is how animals are, right? And that maybe it's a more natural way for them to communicate with us. This is just one thought. I have lots of other ones, but this is just one thought because I have been seeing something more pronounced with the nonverbal individuals. But it does seem like there may be something kind of primal. And in all these conversations we're having, Rupert, like another thing I always go back to is the fact that we don't, as humans, don't acknowledge the fact that we are animals.
Oh, I do. I know I'm a stinky monkey. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right. But we really need to acknowledge it. Like
Yeah.
we talk about it like the animals are over here,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And then we're like, the civilized people, we're intellectuals, but like we are animals too, and
Yeah.
maybe, it would do us some good to remember that and to go back to that more.
I couldn't agree more. I'd like to hear, I've got a couple of things to
Okay.
say around that, but you said you've got lots of thoughts. So
Mhm.
if that's only one area of speculation, what are your others?
Well, this might be sort of in a random order, but another thing that I was going to tell you that I've learned when you're talking about the horses that you've gotten for your program that came in and were kind of cranky and stiff, and you guys rehabilitated them, trained them, and then they became, happy to do their job. Another epiphany that I've had throughout this process is that horses can be trained for emotional engagement. That was
Go on.
something that would have never occurred to me, and I've learned that from Romeo and Ziggy because and it's interesting because I've been around many different disciplines of competitive riding, like spanning the English world and the Western world. And I'm going to even throw polo in there, race horses, all of it. So when you have like an experienced show jumper, for example, that goes in to do the jump off, when they hear the buzzer go off and the timer's starting, they know, right? The horse knows it's time to jump off. It's time to go faster. It's time to turn tighter. Race horses know when it's time to,
Sure.
turn it on and run and open up as much as they can. Polo ponies know how to rate to the ball, like roping horses rate the steer. So they all learn what it is that their job is, so to speak. Well, I've witnessed Romeo and Ziggy learning what their job is as well, which is interesting because the training that I do with them outside of the therapy work is mostly in hand, like maneuverability type training, like teaching them and I usually just work them in a like a little rope halter, and there's no need to use bits or anything with them. So but they do lateral work. They do leg yields, they do side passes, they do shoulder in, turn on the haunches, turn on the forehand. I practice backing them through lines of pulls because I want them to be super maneuverable and light. I don't want to have to ever pull hard on them, so they undergo all that type of training. But when they're in the therapy setting, the training is used to put them in the right position to interact with the person as effectively as possible. After they're in that position, then it's up to them to have an exchange. But I've seen them learn what their job is, and they don't respond to every person the same way either. They definitely, I think, seem to respond better. That's why I'm saying the people that have more advanced cognitive decline, and maybe it's because they're like quieter, their energy levels quieter, they're more still, they move more slowly, but it does seem like the horses respond to them better, like not that, even than the people that are more alert.
When you say better, can you define better?
More demonstrative, more emotionally outgoing, where almost like they're seeking the person out to interact with them. Whereas some of the other people that are maybe more excited to see Romeo and Ziggy, they go to them more, you know what I mean? So I guess suppose the horse doesn't really have to come to them. But it's a curiosity. I would say I see curiosity in them, like,
Mm.
what's going on with this person? Let's go over and check it out, kind of a
Mm.
thing.
Yeah. Okay. What springs to mind is, again, neuroplasticity. If you're doing all that groundwork with those horses and all those laterals, again, you're engaging their vestibular systems. They're crossing the midlines. So you're going to get that BDNF effect I was
Right.
talking about. So their horse's own cognition grows. And one of the things I didn't talk about, but this is a natural way in, is it's not just the horses get more cooperative and happier. It's like they become emotionally intelligent. And the same thing, like they can begin to not just figure stuff out, but handle that, not just figure shit out, but handle their shit. And this same is true, we find in movement method. So for example, classrooms that adopt movement method, there have been multiple studies done on it now, and there's a PhD done on it in 2024 through Grand Canyon University, but other at least 8 or 9 other studies. But we also got the reports from the teachers saying after about 10 weeks of doing movement method stuff, which is not dissimilar, but it's combined with learning, the kids went from a them and us kind of a confrontational, normal relationship between kids and teachers, and went to a sort of cooperative relationship. And after about 10 weeks, we got reports saying, honestly, we don't need them in the classroom anymore. We can just give them the assignment, tell them how to do the project. Then they divide up into little groups and they go off into the areas of the school that they find the best for them, for their learning environment. Some go outside, some go to quiet corners, and we don't need to supervise it. It's like they become emotionally intelligent. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So I went to look at one of these schools because I hadn't actually looked at my own method in schools. I just found some people to do it. And I went to the school in northern Germany, and I walked through about 5 or 6 rooms, which were just full of kids of all ages, all clustered together in little groups working on projects without any supervision. And then I went into an actual classroom, and these 2 little Arab boys, Syrian refugees, pulled me aside. Oh, you speak English? We're learning English. Let's show you how we learn English. And they pulled me into the corridor and showed me how they had concocted a dice game with a hopscotch game by themselves to learn English through where the dice landed and how many hops you did. And this was my method kind of being shown back to me by kids who had no idea who I was.
Right.
And I started crying. It's like, Jesus, I have no idea, But I think once one gets into metacognition, and that's any brain, right? That's an equine brain, a human brain, a dog brain. You also get, what is emotional intelligence really? Emotional intelligence is sort of compassion. So if a horse is in a sort of top-down instruction kind of a lifestyle, does it need to develop compassion for its human? Or does the human need to demonstrate more compassion to the horse because of the demands that the human is making? I would posit that what you've been doing with your horses, because it's not just Romeo and Ziggy, I think it's others too, right? Is you are creating that emotional intelligence in them. You put it there yourself. You said you can train horses to how did you put it? You can train horses to be emotionally
Engaged.
Right?
Yeah.
That really is a type of compassion. And so then is what they're doing when they encounter these more far gone individuals, human individuals, are they recognizing suffering and of some kind and doing what any mammal does within the mammalian caregiving system to try and assuage it? And I would speculate that probably is what's going on. You also talked about verbal and non-verbal. Of course, we know that horses vocalize, and we know that, like many animals, they often vocalize at audible ranges that our human ear can't hear. Like, so, elephants do these low frequency ones that go over many, many kilometers, and horses apparently do something quite similar. But we have this larynx. We don't just vocalize, we do rap, we do poetry, we write rock songs, we do what we're doing here. And that allows us to strategize, which makes us top predator. So it's both our savior and our downfall a bit, because we're victims of our own success, perhaps.
You just said something interesting about strategizing.
Yeah.
Because there is an element of dishonesty to strategizing in a way. I mean, the predatory mindset, and again, once you take that away, horses, as we know, can read people very accurately, so I think that's part of one reason why, the therapy work with them is so interesting, is that you kind of can't bullshit them, so to speak. But I think, again, what I wonder is when you lose that veil of language, or you didn't have it to begin with, if that puts you in a different state.
Puts you in a state of vulnerability that is similar to theirs.
Do you think it's more honest, though? Do you think it's less self-deceiving?
Honesty and deception are all through the eye of the beholder. So humans are not the only animals that strategize, right? All predators, all predators strategize. So a dog, a wolf pack, is not morally wrong for creating a ruse that makes the deer run that way, so that there's actually an ambush for them over there. And lions are not morally corrupt because they do the same thing.
Right.
They're just honestly using the tools that they need to use to survive. But what I wonder, and you make a difference between, say, dog therapy and horse therapy. So dogs are not unlike us. They strategize. They form relationships and alliances based around getting food. I suppose you could say horses do, but horses basically are our prey. We are the prey.
Well, dogs evolved to please humans, and so I think that it's less. I don't think it's like unusual to have a dog come up to you that you've never met before and be affectionate, right? That's not unusual. Like it's sort of like you expect that. I think it's more rare if the dog's not friendly than it is. Most dogs will come up to somebody, want to lick you or whatever. But I think when a person has an emotional engagement with a horse, there's a level of awe that they experience.
Good word. Tell us about awe.
I call it the awe factor. That's what I see in these people's faces, is they're in awe, that it sort of shocks them out of maybe a mundane existence, especially as we start to work more with people that are living in homes, permanently in memory care facilities that are locked down or whatever. I see it on their faces. When we bring a horse in, you just see them all of a sudden, like this look of surprise of like, what? A horse is here? You know what I mean? And it's kind of almost like maybe snaps you out of like rumination or withdrawal. The best way I have to describe it at the moment is to tell you that I see awe, that people having being in awe of the horses.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting studies being done into awe at the moment, and it's true that the human's natural state is to be in a semi-constant state of awe. If you are living in nature, I've been lucky enough to live and work with hunter-gatherer peoples, mostly in the Kalahari area of southern Africa, and it's just a constant state of awe, because there's the wide landscape, there's the great sky, there's very powerful, strong nature, there's an elephant, there's a lion, this is all pretty awesome.
And we as human animals evolved to live that way.
Indeed.
But our society has evolved so quickly into this urban state that we're in, and now on the cusp of this AI revolution, that our brains, there's no way our
Digital
brains
dementia.
could have caught up, have caught up to this. And I think a lot of the issues that we have in our society is because we're living in an unnatural way. And
totally agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
One of the things that I feel like, Daryl and I talk about this a lot, is that we feel like we're bringing nature to people that don't get to experience nature anymore. Like that the horse is sort of a symbol of that.
Yes, it's so true. And whenever you examine like language around horses, talk back to language again, but the vocabulary that we use around horses outside of equestrian vocabulary, it's always a positive, right? That guy's a real stud. They're always about beauty, passion, speed, freedom. Hold your horses. There's just so many sayings and synonyms that we use that we've been observing horses for millennia and admiring them. And
I was going to say there could be a genetic memory component to all of this as well.
Indeed. In fact, that takin, weird Mongolian word program I was talking about, it's actually the Mongolian word for the wild horse, what we would call the Przewalski's horse that was never domesticated.
Okay.
And they call it takin, and it means honored one or revered one. Honoring the essential wild nature of the horse. I think there's something about horses that reminds us of the wild nature of ourselves in the good way, in the best of it. As you said, that sort of awe way, because horses do inspire awe. You're absolutely right. What's interesting to me too is that given that horses are naturally afraid of us, like all herbivores, they have to be, because you love Romeo, but if your kids were starving, you'd eat Romeo. Wouldn't be happy about it, but you would want him as your, because you'd have to prioritize your children. And in the back of every horse's mind, they sort of know that about us. And so they have a good reason to be a bit skeptical. And then what you're describing, when they go and do this kind of extra desire, effort to make this bridge across that, maybe they're also correctly divining that this monkey probably won't eat them. But nonetheless, why should they care from a monkey? Because monkeys are trouble for horses. Yet they do. I observed that with Betsy. And as you say, yes, it seems to be the most vulnerable among us that they reach out to in this way. What I wonder is it going back to the work of people like Rupert Sheldrake? I don't know if you're familiar with him, the British physicist that was basically kicked out of mainstream physics because he dared to suggest that...
He's the one that did the study on dogs.
Yes.
On dogs, knowing their owners. I have that book.
Yeah. To all the listeners and watchers, we won't go into it here, but look up Rupert Sheldrake dogs. Okay, he's an eminent professor, but they
It's like dogs who know when their owners are coming home, I think is what the book's called.
Exactly. And that dogs not only knew when their owners were like driving up the driveway, they knew when they had left work. How did they know that 20, 30, 50 kilometers away? How did they know? And so he came up with this idea of morphic resonance, which is that there's a field, there's just one general field of consciousness, and everything is an offshoot. So everything's part of it, similar to, you go to the ocean, you see a wave, you notice the wave as its own thing, but you also know that it's connected to the entire ocean. And when the wave breaks, it just goes back to the ocean. And you know this about evaporation with water. The rain that hits you is the rain that hits you, but it's also part of the ocean, but it's, and if you by extension take that into everything, then why would there not be a resonant field of consciousness? So then he had the temerity to suggest that, consciousness might not be a product of the human brain, but the other way around. But I think that when you are looking at something like what you're seeing with Romeo, is that not a sort of, perhaps one can't empirically prove it, but what else could it be?
Well, but this kind of goes back to what I was trying to say about language, is I wonder if we have lost the ability to tap into those,
Mm.
I'm going to just use the term quote unquote other senses that we used to have, that somehow when we got language and the over intellectualization, and then we learned to rely so much on that, that we lost some of these other abilities that animals have, that still have always had. And we did too.
Actually, we still do. Remember that there's lots of people on the planet who don't live like you and I live, who
Right.
tap
Right.
into those fields of consciousness every day.
Right.
Like if you are a bushman hunter-gatherer in the Kalahari, you have to know how to become the animal that you hunt, or
Right.
you will go very hungry. And you need to know how to talk to the plants in the Amazon, or you're not
Yep.
going to discover that this one and that one create ayahuasca. But if you do it with that one, and that one, and boil them for even 20 minutes too long, it will kill you. You don't do that by trial and error. And
Right.
how do you learn that this type of mushroom, blah, blah? You don't do it by wiping out your entire clan so that one person thinks, oh, I guess it's that mushroom. But hey, look, there's no one to
Right.
breed with now. So that knowledge has gone away. No, people are still doing this,
Yeah.
but not in our society. Yeah. Or not many in our society, some. Yeah.
And we evolved to be more, to live more that way, right? I mean, so yeah. I mean, I think it kind of goes, to me, it kind of goes back to that same thing, that there, is just a primal nature there that uh, is connecting with the animal, and I also feel like I see recognition, like on the horse's face and the person's face.
Mm. Go on. Talk more about that.
It's like like, you know, again, it's like they're definitely experiencing awe. I definitely think an emotional encounter with a horse is more powerful than a dog, because it's something different and unique. Obviously, a lot of older people too did grow up on farms and have been around horses, so there's that as well, that it could be bringing, it does bring back memories there. We've had a lot of people share childhood memories with us involving horses. I guess the thing that I've realized too is that just because you lose the ability to use language doesn't mean that you're not still there. And I didn't really know that. It was something I've never really thought a lot about. And that there's other ways of connecting that remain.
Absolutely. Yes, because we are the storytelling ape.
Mhm.
It's very difficult for us when we encounter people that can no longer tell story, or can't from an early age, like a nonverbal kid, to not see them as some other species, because it really defines our species, the larynx.
Right.
Right. However, what's also really interesting about it is, when you're saying, well, does language get in the way? And I'm thinking about people like, my Bushman friends, they're highly articulate. They use a lot of language. In fact, their language is really evolved. They have these phonetic clicks that they use. So they
Uh-huh.
don't just use consonants, but, for example, the one of the healers that healed my son, Unter is his name, and the healers, the Bushman that I'm actually partially related to by marriage, that's a whole
Uh-huh.
story. I call the Kamani. And, they have like 6 phonetic clicks in among all the other things. So they're really evolved with language, but the language doesn't stand in the way of them being able to contact the ancestors in a shamanic trance state, or talk to plants or talk to animals, because they're not using it for separation. So they're not trying to define themselves outside of that. In fact,
Mhm.
they're using language to do the opposite, I'd say. And what is healing but conflict resolution, right? So you have a dilemma. Let's say you have dementia. That to some
Mhm.
degree is a dilemma, and it presents problems. Or you're an autistic child that cannot speak and cannot communicate your needs. That does create
Mhm.
problems, right? We even know with basic toddlers, when they can't communicate their needs, even if they're neurotypical, they throw a tantrum. The frustration is so great.
Right.
So what you're observing is suffering, really. That's what's causing the tantrum. So what's the opposite of suffering? The opposite of suffering is joy, is well-being.
Right.
And can language be used to that? Of course, that is story. Story is always about the resolution of conflict. It's the hero's journey is always resolution, or the heroine's journey. But we have evolved since agriculture languages of separation rather than languages of unity. So if you use language to evolve a dance that lets you talk to elephants, and then you train other people how to do that dance that lets you talk to elephants, there is something called the elephant dance in the Kalahari. You're going to use language, but you're going to use it to try to connect with elephants rather than to separate yourself from elephants and kill them and get their ivory. You're going to tap into some element of elephant that is about healing. But I think what I've observed is it goes two ways. So shape-shifting in shamanic contexts, people often wonder what that is. And like, is it like American Werewolf in London, where like you actually sprout hair and, you know, a spotty coat and a tail? No, I've seen it happen. So when Besa, who was the healer I was closest to, would take on leopard energy, he could call a leopard out of the bush while he was in a state of trance, which is, imagine you trying to call a cougar out of the bush right now. You're sitting in Oregon, go outside the back door, call for a cougar. It's not going to happen. But these guys can. And then why would the leopard come? Why did he want to make contact with the leopard? So he wanted to make contact with the leopard so he could go inside its body, borrow its nervous system to go a distance and take a certain energy, spiritual energy that the leopard has, to go and catch the wrongdoing that has been inside this person they're trying to heal. Sometimes he might use lion energy. Sometimes he might use, and I saw him call a leopard out of the bush, fall into trance. Well, no, it's the other way around. Fall into trance. Then his people sat with him and said, the leopard will come now. And the leopard came and then went off on its mission. And they sat with him for as many hours as it took for the leopard to come back into the area and him to regain consciousness. Many people who've worked in situations like that have seen that. So he was trying to connect with leopard, but leopard wanted to cooperate. Leopard also wanted to be connected with. And what you've described with Romeo and Ziggy, them wanting to bridge this gap in order to create healing, to resolve conflict, to resolve a dilemma across species, because we're all part of one resonant morphic field. But perhaps when the habit of using divisive language that separates us from the world around us rather than integrating us with the world around us, perhaps when that falls away and leaves, as you say, the language of emotion, perhaps then it's easy for animals to do what they actually are supposed to do anyway, which is make contact with us in this way, just in the same way that we make contact with them. Because, you know, animals will come to humans for healing. You know, lots of stories about, you know, lions with a, you know, thorn in the paw coming to someone. Right. This exists. This goes on. This is not just a fanciful story. So I just wonder if what you're doing is actually creating effectively a shamanic experience in an old people's home. And when I listened to your description, what you said is, I made a little note of this. They have a circle of chairs. The horse is in the middle. And then the horse goes to each person for a minute or two, gives that person what they need. You just described a Bushman shamanic ritual. The healer, people gather in a circle. The healer is at the fire. The healer dances around the fire until they go into a state of altered consciousness. Then they go to each individual that's around the fire and give that person what they need. Take out something, put something in. And perhaps that trance dance has been called for a particular individual who's got a particular problem. But everyone who's gathered there will get attention from the shaman. And I just, you know, you described what was going on with Romeo. It's like, well, what is it but that?
Yeah, and that is like our group setting. That's the way we do our group visits. And maybe there's a collective energy too, because everyone can see what's going on, because it's a circle. We did recently, though, start visiting people, room-bound residents, where we go into their rooms and they'd be in their bed, and we bring the horses, and the horses could put their heads over the bed and visit people that way. And definitely that is also equally profound as well. Obviously, we're just trying to find as many ways as possible of reaching people, that wouldn't be able to have the experience otherwise. Yeah, I mean, I think it all those things could be possible. And this is kind of a side note, but the timing for me of this whole adventure coming like kind of I would describe it as unfurling. That Romeo Roadshow process has been like this unfurling, as it was not anything that was ever planned, and it kind of just unfolded in front of me, and one thing led to another. The timing of when it came into my life personally was very interesting, because I had reached a point. I'd done a lot of the, professional equestrian world for a long time, a lot of showing, training, coaching, all that stuff. And I had reached a point where I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to continue working with horses, but I wasn't feeling that was the direction I wanted to go in anymore. And I was looking for something, like I was trying to figure out what my new path was going to be. And I'd been kind of in the works of trying to figure it out for a period of time. It'd been a while, like several years. And I had tried some different things, but nothing really kind of like caught my passion and focus. And this came into my life, something that I did not expect, that I never in a million years would have thought I would be doing this. And as it unfolded in front of me, I just felt like I had to keep doing it. It meant so much to people, and I knew someone needed to do it that knew what they were doing to make it safe and all that stuff. And it was kind of like perfect timing too. So one of my beloved grooms who helped us in the early stages with Romeo, he said to me one day, like a little ways into it was before we really started doing the work with seniors. He said, Sanaa, I think of you as like an angel in Romeo's life. And in a way, it's like this might sound really out there to some people, but like I have thought multiple times that maybe he's returning the favor to me too, like showing me like this other path, So, and that does get into all of that spirit, way more spiritual realm. But I never would have come up with this on my own. And I do think I'm a relatively open-minded person, and I'm an idea person, but that's very ironic too.
Well, the most practical down-to-earth horse culture on the planet is Mongolia.
Mm-hmm.
They eat them, they drink them, they live under roofs constructed from them. They wear them on their bodies. There's no part of the life out in the nomadic countryside in Mongolia that is not practically affected by horses in the same way that, say, plastic practically affects our life or something like that.
Right.
We don't eat it and drink it. Well, actually, we do. We're getting all those microplastics.
I was going to say plastic is our spirit animal.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
Oh my God. Which actually, in a weird way, is all right. Because if plastic is our spirit animal, then really the forest is our spirit animal. Because what is plastic but fossil forests, really? So at the end of the day, I guess, everyone can relax. But So I've got micro fossil forests in me or something. I don't know. But the that's a bit more reassuring and comforting. But the fact that they are so down to earth and like this horse needs to take me from A to B, and that's
Yes.
just that.
Right.
And this horse needs to help me round up that livestock over there. Otherwise,
Right.
we will starve. And that's just that.
Right.
Despite that intense practicality, their entire spiritual world, not surprisingly perhaps, is built around the horse. And
Right.
so they have this concept of the wind horse. The Tibetan Buddhists have it too. There's some cross-fertilization between Mongolian shamanism and Tibetan Buddhism for interesting geographical reasons. And it's like your luck, your mojo, your well-being, your spirit, your soul, somewhere in the middle of all that. And when you go to see a shaman on the Mongolian steppe, they're tapping to horse energy, and it's an ancestor energy, and that's kind of what they're doing, kind of what they're using, and even to the sound that they make on the shaman's drum, dudadum 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 dudadum. It's the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Yeah.
The galloping horse, and actually that is in a lot of Northern European shamanism too, which came across from Siberia with people like the Yamnaya tribes in the early Bronze Age, and left those same shaman drums, and now you hear them in Celtic music as well. It's all horse.
Right.
It's all horse. It's all horse. So it's only really, I suppose, since about the 17th century with Descartes coming up with this thing of, I think, therefore I am, and therefore if you can't think, you don't have a soul, and therefore you're not really, and that means we can be horrible to animals, and that getting really kind of, people really jumped on that one for some weird reason, and we are still like recovering Cartesianoholics or something. Whereas, a Mongolian who's like super practical horse person would look at us and go, well, of course it's tied up with your spirituality. I mean, you saying that humans don't have a spirituality, that's like saying the sky is red when it's blue, because as much as one might want to deny it, it just keeps surfacing. As my friend Warwick Schiller, I think you should get on his podcast. I'm going to suggest that he has you as a guest, says in his Australian accent, you can't fight the woo. It will find you. It will find you. And of course, a lot of the most seemingly conservative people, in America are very Christian, or at least they think they are, even if they're not quite living by the Christ message. So yes, I think you're right. He probably did, or is starting to resolve something in you. And this is actually what I wanted to ask you next. Okay. So I'm sure that many of our listeners and watchers are speculating about where your name comes from, because it's an unusual name. And when I first heard it, when Kansas told me, I'm like, oh, that's like some California name, And then I'm like, no, I've just heard that name before. I've heard that name before. And I was like, no, it's not. It's a Middle Eastern name. And and then I'm trying to locate it, and then I said, is your family from Lebanon? It's more like Near East than Middle East. And you're like, well, almost. And so I'm not going to spoiler alert, but I want you to tell us that ancestral story. And then let's talk about how Romeo and Ziggy might be playing into that, and how it might benefit the rest of us. Where's your family from?
So I was born in Jerusalem, Israel. My mother's American, mostly like European descent on my mother's side. And my father is Arab-Israeli. And my father's side of my family, from what I know, were Bedouins that settled in the Galilee region of Israel, which apparently has population, that are Arab Israeli, that are Bedouin descendants. So when I was very young, I was about a year old, my mother brought me back to the States. She wanted me to grow up in the United States. And my parents split up very early on, and my mother raised me by herself. So I didn't really have any connection to my father's side of my family. And it wasn't until early on, after I moved to California, it was actually when MySpace was first started. So it was even before Facebook. I had a cousin in Israel that found me on MySpace, and we connected, and we talked a couple times, sent messages, and he's like, "I'm your cousin, from Israel." And my mom confirmed, "Yep, that's your cousin Adam. He's a little older than you." And so we talked, and he shared more family history, at least as far as what he knew. And he said, we can't believe that you are into horses and that you ride horses. Our grandfather was, I believe it's called a farce. It's an Arab name for a horseman, and he raced Arabians in the desert. And so they, felt very strongly that's where I got the passion for horses from. But I didn't know anything about any of that until I was in my 20s, is when I met my cousin through MySpace. And growing up, I was just a kind of naturally born horse crazy kid, basically. I would say my mom is an animal person, but wasn't necessarily a horse person. There wasn't really anyone in my family that were horse people. So she got me into riding lessons young, and that's how I got started in horses.
Did
So it
your
wasn't until
did your
later
parents
on that.
retain any
Go ahead.
contact after she went back to America? Did they
I'm
not?
say that again. I didn't hear you.
Did
I'm
your
sorry.
parents break off contact after she moved back to America? Like, did they not talk anymore?
Yes. I mean, my father didn't want to be a father, so he kind of exited stage left when I was very young. He did come to see us when I was like 2 years old, and then left and didn't want to participate. So I think at a certain point, my mom realized it would be better to, not have contact
Right,
with him.
got it.
So he was not in my life at all after that.
And was it his father who had been the horse dude?
Yes.
So your father must have had contact with horses growing up.
I
Must
don't
have.
know that. I'm not sure that he did. I mean, I don't really know. The only
But
thing I
if
do,
his own father was doing horses, how could he not have had access to or contact with horses?
the only thing that I know is that there was a very, very large age difference between my grandfather and my grandmother. So I think they had settled in Galilee by the time he was born. So I don't know that he was around the real Bedouin way of life, so to speak, but I don't know. I haven't ever
Right.
been able to ask him that. So I don't know.
Well, okay. So when you told me that story, a whole bunch of connections went off in my head. Okay. So I think when people think of Israel, obviously they don't normally think of Arabs,
Right.
but there are a lot of Arabs in Israel. And when people think of Israel, they don't often think of horses.
Right.
But there's an ancient horse culture in Israel. If you open up the New Testament, which is the sort of mythological history of the Judaic kingdom
Mhm.
through the Bronze Age, there's tons of horses in it, and they were all using horses all the time. And of course, so with as you say, the Bedouin tribes, and that's where we get, our Arab horses and to some degree our thoroughbred horses and blah blah blah. And the Islamic world is very much and always was a big horse culture. People forget this. All of the texts of classical dressage from the Middle Ages are in Arabic. They're not in European languages at that point. Then with the Renaissance, they become Europeanified again.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because it's just a more literate culture, particularly in southern Spain and North Africa. But anyway, but we talked about conflict resolution.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I think we can all agree that people have been fighting over that bit of rock for a very long time.
Yes.
For a very long time. Okay. Since before people had words like Jew and Arab, the same people were for some reason saying this bit of rock we will we care about it so much, we'll die for it. You know,
Right.
this goes back into the Bronze Age. Even in Judea itself, you know, you've got so many competing tribes that they're just talking about within the New Testament, some of whom are supposedly of what we now call Jewish origin, and some of whom are not. And they're tussling it out, and they're tussling it out, and they're also tussling it out with Egypt, and they're tussling it out with the Hittites up there in Turkey and Syria, and they're battling it out with the Assyrians and Babylon, so that they end up going into, you know, bondage. They're all riding horses. They're all riding horses. And if there's one thing that, and then the Crusaders show up, and what do they show up? They show up on horseback, and blah, and blah, and blah. If there's one unifying element in international human relations, it's usually the shared passionate interest thing, which is why football, that's why I have the World Cup, you know, the Eurovision Song Contest. But horses are that too. So you know this, every time, you know, you or I can just show up anywhere in the world, find the horse people, and we're grand.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't
Instant
matter
friend.
if we speak the language. It doesn't matter if we share the same religion. The color of our skin makes no difference. Like, ponies are us, and that's just that.
Yes.
It's interesting to me that there you are with this Arab-Israeli name, not really knowing your heritage until later, that there's a horse heritage there, that you come out of this ancient horse heritage, which must always have been both a source of conflict, the soldiers fighting each other and doing it on horseback, and a source of healing. They're sharing their knowledge. They all share this love of the horse. When they're not in battle, they're trading horses from each other and saying, oh, that's a good mare. Can I breed to that one? And then you come over to the USA, and then you end up entering the sort of field of consciousness of horse healing from a rather particular place, with a rather particular name, with a rather particular genetic history. And you are involved in conflict resolution, having come out with a horse thing from possibly the most contested corner of the planet that exists. And you said that you feel that Romeo might be reaching out to you. Maybe there's some work he would like you to do. What goes on in your gut and in your heart when you look into where all this is going for you?
Well, I feel like I have always felt a very, very strong, I've always had an extremely strong sort of compass for what I wanted to do from a very young age. My mom really wanted me to go the academic route, but I wanted to be a horse trainer. And at that time, when I was going, you know, in high school, thinking about going to college, at that time, there weren't a lot of academic programs for equine studies or whatever. It just wasn't very available. So I did what everybody else did, you know, apprenticeship, working student, learning, hands-on learning. I went that route. Getting a little off topic here, circling back to what was remind me again, where were we going with this? I don't want to go off on a tangent too much.
Romeo
Okay,
got in store for you?
got it. So I have always felt like horses have meant so much to me in my life. They were everything to me from a very young age. I've learned so many things from horses, not just about riding, but you know, feel like horses taught me to be an entrepreneur, you know, like all kinds of things, like to be industrious, you know, to be creative, like so many life lessons. And I'm very grateful that I was able to be involved with horses, as particularly because I was a child of a single mother. We didn't have a lot of economic resources. And looking back on it, it was pretty miraculous that I was able to do as much as I was. And that's probably been one of the hardest things for me working in the professional equestrian world is feeling like I want this to be more accessible to people, and that it's very challenging that it isn't that accessible for various reasons, most of which boil down to the cost of it. And
Unless you're living in Wyoming where God gives you
right.
the pasture and cleans up your horse. Yeah.
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 In which case you already have horses anyway.
Exactly.
So
And you're part of a horse club.
so the first thing with the Romeo venture is that it sort of naturally, aligned with my desire to make horses accessible to people that wouldn't have access to them. So, and kind of like I said, I can't take credit for coming up with the plan. Like I mean, honestly, Romeo led us through that, but it really actually it's so brilliant, like in so many ways. Like it was so brilliant. And that's what's so funny about the whole story, that it wasn't premeditated. But the van, like Daryl literally said to me, "Do you remember the van from National Velvet? I want to build a van like that for Romeo." Like that, like literally was the how this all started. But now that we have the van, I'm like, it's so brilliant to be able to take them into the city, into a parking garage, parallel park. I mean, we're making them accessible. So but there's so many layers to the project. Like it has recently taken a bunch of twists and turns that I didn't even see coming. So we have been working on coming up with more of a concrete framework. We just filed all of our papers to start a 501c3 so that we can start, properly funding and grow this. But ultimately, I want to be able to continue to do the research and development necessary to really develop this field, and eventually with the idea of being able to make it more accessible, some form of scaling it or helping other people learn how to do it, like what you're doing, so that it can be available to more people. And I had ideas of how I would do that eventually, based off of other models of how I've seen other people do it. But even recently, something just came up that I didn't see coming, which is that multiple universities have expressed interest in working with us with their students and having their students learn this. And I did not see that coming. And that's really interesting, because for me, it goes back to this thing of my mom wanting me to go the academic route. And
Right.
I think she was very disappointed that I didn't go that route for a long time. And now here I am giving presentations at major universities,
Yeah.
and, in front of professors and doctors and, researchers about horses. And they are genuinely interested and fascinated. And so that's like a whole nother level. So yeah, I guess if, this is somehow Romeo's showing me this path, it's continuing to unfold, and who knows like where it's going to go next at this point. I mean, it continues to amaze me.
Have you reached out to, or are you in contact with Dr. Nina Ekholm-Frey? She's
No,
University of Denver Director of Equine Programs at the Institute for Human-Animal Connection.
I
Uh,
haven't, but I've heard about the programs at that school.
I have a feeling that, well, I think I'll connect you, but
Okay.
I think you guys are a natural fit. They were sort of the first that I know of in the USA academic full-on department in just human-animal connection.
Yeah.
And as you say, this is now a field.
Yeah.
There's also a wonderful woman who's just about to become Dr. Kes Sullivan, who
Mhm.
she did that study through University of Bournemouth with her supervisor, Anne Hemingway, Dr. Anne Hemingway. That was the one on domestic violence that I referred to a little
Right.
bit earlier. And I think that there's some people that you could and probably should join forces with. I know you've got other people as well, but where there's specific interest in this equine human field.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the Horses in Humans Research Foundation, and that's Pebbles
Yes.
who runs that, who's been on this show. But it's so interesting to me that, when I was first starting in this, academics were not interested,
Right.
But luckily, there were lots and lots of grad students out there who rode horses, who
Yeah.
all kind of went, well, why isn't there a field of
Yeah.
study here? And then they all went and got their PhDs and became academics, and now boom,
Right.
here we are. And then, yes, as you say, now your mum can she'll probably still kvetch at you that you don't have a tenured position at some university, but maybe that's coming. You never know. Maybe you'll get your honorary PhD.
You never know. It's just ironic, you know?
Mm.
I mean,
It is.
I do think the universe has a sense of humor.
Really, I hadn't noticed. Yeah, what's next? If you project, not even what's next for what's your dream? What would you really, really, really like this to turn into?
I really want to preserve a place in our society for horses, you know, that humans can stay connected to horses even as we continue to evolve in this modernized way. That I think that they have a very important role to play now more than ever. I mean, horsepower has a whole new meaning to me now. And I think if I can do a good job at being a steward of this, I'll be able to demonstrate that. And, you know, I think as it gets more visibility, you know, and people realize how important it is, it can grow and expand. And hopefully too, as that happens, it just like what you're doing in the conversations we're having today, we can also educate people on how to be good stewards of caring for the animals and how they're partners in this with us.
Yes, 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 yes. But I'm sorry, that's all BS. What do you want to do with this?
Um, I mean, I feel like that's like I want, like I said, I want to
There's a
preserve
vision
it
in there. There's a vision in there that you're not communicating. I can feel it.
in order to preserve it. We have to teach the next generation how to do it. So teaching, I
Right.
want to elevate. I want to elevate the therapy work too,
Hmm.
to properly to where I feel like it should be.
Which is.
A lot higher level of horsemanship
Mhm.
and understanding for the animal. And I think I keep going back to accessibility, not just accessibility in transporting the horses to places that horses wouldn't normally go, but maybe accessibility in being able to teach people how to do this that wouldn't normally get the opportunity to learn about horses or to be involved in something like this.
Right.
You know, and I think the opportunity just recently, I realized that there may be an opportunity to bridge a gap between young people and old people. Like one of the
There we go.
professors that we met with the other day had said that she felt like if we could create a program that students could be involved in with a therapy work, that this may be a way to get young people interested in the field of gerontology.
That is what I was digging for. Putting old people in old people parking is a really stupid idea, right? Because
Yeah,
no other culture does that.
right.
Because these are the people with the knowledge and the wisdom. And
Right.
then right when they're in a position to impart it to you, you put them in the freezer, you know,
Yeah.
and then are flabbergasted when we can't find answers to questions that maybe they figured out in 1973. And because they're not around to ask, we make more mistakes perhaps than we needed to. The idea of a sense of purpose, like, you know, all animals, humans and others need a sense of purpose. I remember when we took our two little kids when they were really small to see my wife's grandmother, who was in old
Mhm.
people parking and had dementia. And she didn't know who we were. And it didn't matter because as soon as she saw the two little kids, she just started ordering chocolate cake and then teaching them how to play Chinese checkers.
Yeah.
She went from kind of like, huh? To, well, this is how you do the da 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 ba ba da ba dum. And then when we stood up to go, she went, and what one realized was oh, in the old days, maybe if there was granny or grandpa sitting by the fire in the corner and they were drifting away from time to time and drifting back, but the intergenerational way of life, the proper mammalian tribal way of life, meant that they were constantly engaged. And
Right.
so they were fulfilling economic and social functions regardless of where their cognition was. But because their cognition was probably better because they were engaged, they were
Yeah.
also less gaga. Because when you go into these hunter-gatherer areas, I can tell you, you don't see it. You don't see it. You don't see
Right.
old people like that. They're so engaged and they're moving physically and their bodies are
Yes.
often young. You just do not see this catatonic sitting around with the brain not there thing. And as you say, the brain is there because you put my kids or you put Romeo into the picture and boom. And that was what I was digging for of where's it going. I think that this particular aspect of our culture, we're talking about conflict resolution here, resolving a dilemma. We have a massive dilemma of
Yeah.
the abandonment of our seniors.
Yes.
And that's a problem not because it's bad for them. It's a problem because it's bad for us. That we don't have our consultants. We don't have our tribal elders. We don't have our council of elders. We're supposed to work everything out as like idiot 40-year-olds, or no, we can't. So, is what you're doing a way towards healing a kind of social disease that's really crept in with the negation of the value of what's soon to be the largest sector of human society? I suspect you're at the cutting edge of this.
Well, there's another interesting twist that we didn't even touch on at all in this talk, but the fact that, like, from the very beginning, Daryl always, likes to film stuff with the horses and just for fun, always taking pictures, always filming, and we were making just cute videos to show people, like, look what we taught Romeo to do, this trick or whatever, and again with no agenda, and going back and watching them because we use them all the time for different things that we're working on, and all the videos were just like giggling and laughing and like, oh, look how cute he is, or oh, good boy, like, because it was just fun. But we have amassed a massive amount of footage, well, like, professionally shot, because she is an expert, at that, and really knows how to get the right camera angles. And she's been teaching me, and I've actually been able to help with it as well. And I had no idea how powerful telling that story was going to be to people. And we recently gave 2 presentations at those 2 universities, and the one university told us it was the best presentation that their summer research fellowship program has had. And in the other university, like, who I didn't really know if they were going to give us the time of day, they were visibly moved by the footage. And that was what sparked the comment about this could be a way to get young people interested in this field. And I do wonder if it does seem like the story of Romeo somehow is a story of unity, like, in that it's something everyone can agree on.
I've got the title of the documentary. Because you're
What?
recovering people's memories and their cognition, right?
Uh-huh.
Wherefore art thou?
Love that. It's so funny because in one of our little reels that we made about our program, one of the seniors is saying, "Wherefore out there, Romeo?" I'll send it to you. So funny. Yeah, that's great. But I do feel like we have this very, very strong storytelling capability that we have not tapped into yet. And it would be super interesting to see, like, I do feel like there's going to be at least one documentary, if not multiple things coming from this, because it's people love it. It's so interesting, and we have so much footage. And
Right, but what you can also show is the value of keeping seniors involved in society.
Yeah.
And you can do it through a story that people think they're engaging in with this cute pony,
Right.
which is a great hook because, no one's going to go see a documentary about the old, but
Well,
they
just
will
like
go to see.
how many young people want to go to school to, take care of old people? I mean, it's not like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, sure. I mean, some people might do it for the money, but yes, it's not like a respected field with status,
right,
but it ought to be. The
right.
care for the elders ought to be like a revered and honored thing,
Yes,
shouldn't it?
yes.
Rather like
And
the
it's
death of
so necessary
someone
right
to be
now too.
paid. Yes,
Yeah,
and it's going to get more and more necessary. I can feel in my gut that this might go somewhere even to another place after this too.
yeah,
Ancestors, you're dealing with people that are about to become ancestors
right.
but who have the ability to impart their wisdom. And even if they've got cognitive decline, Romeo can be like a sort of dream catcher and catch those memories and catch that.
We were visiting an older gentleman in his room the other day, and we had both Romeo and Ziggy at his hospital bed. And I didn't think that he could talk at all. And you could tell he was enjoying the horses visiting, and he kind of started to like, sort of like struggle it seemed like he was struggling to speak, and he tried and tried, and all of the sudden, towards the end of the visit, he mustered up, "I grew up on a farm." And it's
Wow.
like he needed to tell us that, and those words, to me, he wanted us to know how special that was to him, and was struggling to say anything else, but he was able to say, "I grew up on a farm." And I felt like I understood
Huge.
him in that moment.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I wonder if you went back again and again, would more come?
Maybe. I mean, I feel like I've definitely seen progress with the people that I see regularly on other levels.
Now, you have some ancestors of your own that are at work here, reaching out from the Bedouin ancestry of the Arabic horse tradition, which
Mhm.
goes back about at least 4, possibly 6,000 years.
Mhm.
And you're in the process of discovering something about the resolving of a conflict in our society with the jettisoning of the old. And you are exploring that, and you will explore that. And you come from, and your ancestors come from, a part of the world that is embroiled in an endless conflict.
Right.
And while no one person can go and resolve that conflict, I can't help but wonder if programs like yours over there might be a way to bridge understanding between groups of people
That's
who are
fascinating.
at animosity with each other. And it's in your blood. And the ancestors have a funny way of getting things done. Let's export this girl to America. Let's put her in celeb land. Let's make something magical with horses, animals, nature, or happen with that in a way that is clearly needed in that culture. And then maybe let's bring her home for a bit to see what she can do over there. And what would be really interesting would be if you went out to Israel, Lebanon, Syria, or even maybe just the obvious things, just to where your people were the last in Galilee. And you didn't go in saying, I want to resolve conflict between Jews and Muslims.
Mhm.
But when you go into an old people's home over there, you're going to find Jews and Muslims.
Do you
And
think they're in the same homes together?
in some places they will be.
Uh-huh.
In some places they won't be. And whether or not they're in the same homes together, there's nothing to stop you from going into both.
Right.
It doesn't even necessarily have to be you personally. I mean, it might be at the beginning, but you might show some people there how to do the work. And if you create the documentary and you share your own, ancestral story in there, I feel it's pretty likely that someone out there is going to reach out to you. Or that you might say, you know what, sod it, let's just go. And as you say, one of the nice things about minis is you can stick them in the back of a van and go anywhere.
Right.
You don't need to, and it's sort of inclusive and democratized. You can go into urban environments. You can put them in an elevator and go up to the 5th floor.
Right.
I had my ancestors reach out through me, which is what happened with the Bushmen. And we ended up helping several groups who'd been illegally evicted to make way for diamond mines get their land back. And I had a bit of an ancestral debt to them because of things that my family had done to them in the
Mhm.
past, but also I was related because not all my family is white. And that healing journey prepared me for the advocacy I had to do with autism. And the horsemanship that I acquired along the way prepared me to do that work. And it's still not over.
Mhm.
I have to go back out to Botswana now. It's to do the next stage.
Did you know at the time that your ancestors were guiding you?
Yeah. Because when I heard of this particular group of Bushmen in South Africa, where there were not supposed to be Bushmen left anymore, they were all supposed to have been wiped out, that they'd been living by the side of the road for a couple of generations because they'd been kicked out of what's now a national park. They've got a third of it back now. When I heard where they were, I knew that that's where my non-white family were. And I knew that in that area, it's so sparsely populated that all the groups, to some degree, interbreed,
Mhm.
whether voluntarily or not.
Right.
And I thought, absolute gut feeling, Rupert, you have to go have a look. And I did. And I found out I was indeed a cousin by marriage to this group. And, well, then you take the adventure that's in front of you. I feel that you're being prepared for something. But the thing about resolving a loss within society that's global, which is this schism between the old and the young, which is a schism with our mother, it's a schism with our planet, it's a schism with nature, it's a schism with who we are. It causes us such enormous psychological pain to live this way. And you found a mechanism for bridging that gap. You've been shown it by this pony, but there's ancestors guiding the pony and moving through the pony. I talked about shape shifting. I talk about things about people. And I would just encourage you to ask these questions. And then the obvious thing is, if
Okay.
you create some big piece of media, a little bit like I did with the horse boy, well, then people notice, conversations begin, relationships begin, and logical things follow.
Did you publish your book first, or did you do the documentary first?
No, they did. They do them simultaneously, because when I did the book, as an autism dad and as a journalist, I was uncomfortable with the idea that if I wrote a book, let's say, what I said to my publishers, because I was already a writer, and I wrote
Right.
a proposal, but just because you write a proposal doesn't mean the publishers will go for it, as any writer knows. And just because you write a book doesn't mean anyone will notice, That's another thing every writer knows. It's just because you make a film doesn't mean anything, everyone will notice. A lot of things have to come together to make that happen. All right. So I was uncomfortable with the idea that if I went out there and there was great change, that I would be writing this book saying, I went to this place that you'll never go to, and I met these people that you'll never meet, and you kind of have to take my word for it that this happened. And I remember thinking, okay, well, if I was an autism parent sitting in Queens, New York, or London, England, or somewhere, might that feel oddly like a slap in the face in a weird way? So I thought, no, it has to be recorded. If anything happens, we have to record it, including if nothing happens, because what then? And I thought, well, all right, well, at least we're treating the autism as an adventure, not as a sort of end of everything. And that has some merit, no? Because we're being told back then anyway, by all the pediatricians, well, your lives are over, and his life is over. And it's not like he's downstairs right now. He's 25. He just took the train back from Frankfurt, having flown over from America by himself. And he's off youth hosteling to Leipzig, next week. And he's got 3 jobs, and he's drives his own car and just
That's awesome.
And, but he was nonverbal, shitting his pants and, a self-harming tantrum. So they can't, no, we did them simultaneously. And because I felt it just needed a record, an actual physical record where you could see if it happened or if it didn't happen. I didn't know that the work would go global because there was no work at the time that I produced the movie and the film. There was no horseboy method. There was just what I had discovered and stumbled into with my own son. But at that stage, I wasn't really working with others yet.
Right.
And that came afterwards. And then it grew. I just have this weird feeling that you're uniquely placed, and these things don't happen out of the blue.
Yeah, I have definitely gotten a very strong sense throughout this whole journey with Romeo of I would have used the word momentum, but it's had a strange amount of momentum.
Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like this before, like to where it's like I just feel like constantly doors are opening, constantly people are offering to help or wanting to support it, and honestly listening to me talk about it, like being interested in it. I've never felt like obviously I've been around horses my whole life and had lots of horse stories to tell, but never felt that people were as genuinely interested in my horse stories until like Romeo came into my life.
Yeah.
And now everyone that knows me knows about Romeo. So when I see people I haven't seen in a long time, it's a natural conversation topic. What's going on with Romeo? What is he up to now? Like, so yeah, it does feel like something is helping this. I obviously put a lot of work has been put into this, not just by me, but by other people, as part of the team. A lot of people care about this, but even beyond the work that we've put in, there's something else that's been pushing it along. And it seems to be growing and expanding at a fairly rapid pace.
Yeah. Like there's another force behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. I'm fascinated to see where it will go.
Too.
I think everyone listening and watching will be too. Okay, look, we've hit the 2-hour mark. I think people probably want to know how they can get in touch with you, how they can find out more, maybe how they can help.
We have a website. It's romeoroadshow.com. So that has some information about our program. And we have a lot of our regular updates on our therapy visits and other activities on our Instagram account, which is just at Romeo Roadshow. We will, within the next couple of weeks to 30 days, have a link on our website if anyone wants to support the Romeo Roadshow project financially. There will be a way to do that through the website as well.
You said that horses can be trained to become emotionally present, emotionally engaged, as well as physically safe around these populations. you do a lot of in-hand work for this and classical in-hand work and so on. Are you going to start training people how to do this? Is that going to be a program that Romeo will do?
I would love to. I think that's going to be part of the growth of the program, is to be able to teach, others how to do this. Obviously, we need more horses to be able to do that, but I definitely think that that's coming.
I would love to be part of that. So
that would be great. Love that.
Okay. So Kansas and I are talking about doing some gigs together in California next year.
Oh, awesome.
So maybe that's something we should do. Maybe we should get together and look at how the classical work goes into this, which you're already doing, but maybe some ways to systematize it.
I would love that. And also if you can keep me in the loop on scheduling, and I know when you're going to be in town, I'll try to plan some therapy visits when you are here, so that you can maybe come with us and see what we're doing, so you can see us in the field.
I would love to. And with your permission, I might film some of that and put that on.
Yeah.
YouTube. Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, I did bring Kansas one time. She came with me one time, and we talked about, I wanted to get some feedback from her on ways to make the horse interactions better and whatnot. So I think it would be amazing. I'd love to have some collaborators and to be able to talk about it some more.
So watch this space, lads. If you're listening or watching, me, Kansas, and Sanaa will all get together and we'll do a gig in hand work with the amazing Romeo and some others. And we'll let you know when this is going to happen. And maybe you guys want to sign up and come, because it will
That'd be
fun.
great.
All right. Brilliant. Well, Sanaa, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. That was a lot of fun. And I hope we can talk more. There's so much more to talk about.
There absolutely is. I think we should do this again, and all the questions we didn't get to ask. And listeners, watchers, if you got questions, things like, put them in the comments below. We will respond. We read them all. And if you ask us to talk with Sanaa again about stuff, we will. So just tell us and we'll respond.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.